Hi, my name is Jeff, and my topic is the Attica prison uprising. The riot happened in 1971, and it was one of the most well-known and worst prison riots in U.S. history. The maximum security prison was located in Attica, New York, and it held about 2,200 inmates at the time. On the morning of September 9th, about 1,000 of these inmates stormed through the prison, gathering makeshift weapons, burning down parts of the prison, and beating guards. State police were able to control only 3 out of the 4 cell blocks of the prison, and the inmates still had control over the 4th area called D Block, which was a large exercise field that was surrounded by 35-foot walls and watchtowers. They managed to hold 39 prison guards and employees hostage for 4 days in this one area, blindfolding them and keeping them in a tight circle. A group of inmates surrounded the hostages with clubs and knives. During the 4 days they were there, negotiations between police and inmates were not successful. The inmates were demanding for better living conditions, telling the negotiators specific things they wanted, including more religious freedom and better phone privileges. The inmates threatened to slit the throats of the hostages if they did not agree to what they wanted. On the 4th day, Governor Nelson Rockefeller ordered almost 600 state troopers and prison guards to move in with force while helicopters flew over the prison and dumped tear gas into D Block. Inmates were severely beaten and shot even after some of them surrendered. The 3,000 rounds that were fired by police were simultaneously fired with tear gas. They left 29 inmates dead, 10 hostages dead, and 89 people wounded. It was said by police that the hostages were killed by the inmates slitting their throats, but autopsies later revealed that the 10 hostages were killed directly by gunshot wounds, which were obviously from the police. By this time, the public had already believed that the inmates were the ones who killed the hostages. One of the major factors that led to the uprising was that inmates were extremely frustrated with their living conditions. They were each allowed only 1 shower per week and provided with 1 roll of toilet paper every month. Before the riot, inmates did everything they could to address their concerns to the officials. They brought up topics to officials such as substantial medical care, enough food and clothing, and they wanted to fix the unbearable heat. Some inmates wrote letters to the state senator and the Department of Corrections commissioner to try and get their point across, but very little, if anything, was done to fix the things that they wanted. Another major issue was overcrowding in the prison. Attica was designed to hold only 1,200 prisoners, but in 1971 the prison population exceeded 2,000. One of the major reasons for this increase of inmates was because during this time period black empowerment was increasing and a large number of black inmates were transferring to Attica. The African American population in the prison reached 54%, and out of the 383 correctional officers that worked there, every single one of them was white. As you can imagine, this caused serious racial issues. There are many reports from inmates about the guards being abusive and racially discriminatory towards inmates through their time served at Attica. And now here's Danny to talk about a notable, more recent prison riot that occurred in South Texas.
Hi guys, my name is Danny and my topic is the Ritmo prison riot. The Ritmo prison riot occurred on February 20th, 2015, a little over 1 year ago. Its nickname is Ritmo, but the prison's full name is the Willacy County Correctional Center, and it's located in Raymondville, Texas. These riots were mainly over poor conditions and medical care. Tension had been building up at Ritmo for years. About 2,000 of the 3,000 inmates participated in the riots. They were setting fires, wielding pipes, and climbing fences, and just in general causing havoc. Officers used tear gas to try to contain the riots, and it ultimately took nearly 2 days to completely subdue the uprising. Despite all the fighting, only a handful of people were injured. Ritmo is unique in that it is a tent city prison. They have large white Kevlar tents with each one housing about 200 prisoners. There have been complaints for years about the conditions inside of these tents. They were overcrowded, toilets were overflowing, the tents would leak, and large insects would get inside and bite them at night. Ritmo is different from a typical prison in that it is a privately owned for-profit prison. They were one of 13 of these criminal alien requirement prisons. Owned by Management and Training Corporation, Ritmo received nearly $48 million a year in taxpayer money to run this prison. These privately owned for-profit prisons have had issues for years with many complaints of lack of oversight, abuse, neglect, and misconduct. Many of these problems are created because the main priority at these prisons is to turn tax dollars into a profit, rather than provide clean, habitable conditions for the inmates. There's also a huge racial disparity at these prisons, as the guards are almost all white and almost all of the prisoners were Mexican immigrants. There were also issues in 2008 at a Reeves County privately owned prison in Texas regarding the death of an inmate, and in 2012 a guard was killed at a Mississippi privately owned for-profit prison. So these prisons have been commonly creating problems and receiving complaints. A majority of prisoners at these prisons are composed of immigrants who were caught crossing the border multiple times. They are housed in these second-class private prisons with the assumption that they will be deported. Between 1994 and 2012, suspects arrested for federal offenses more than doubled. And by 2012, half of these federal offenses were strictly for immigration violations. A big reason for this was in 2005, a new policy was put into place known as Operation Streamline. This was a zero-tolerance policy regarding border crossing. It made an offense for border crossing a criminal prosecution when prior to this it was a civil violation and the consequences were much less. Zero-tolerance plans like Operation Streamline led to this huge increase in prisoners doing time for border crossing, and this eventually flooded these private prisons, leading to overcrowding. Prosecution of illegal entry and re-entry has since become the most commonly prosecuted federal crime in the U.S. In 2011, it cost U.S. taxpayers about $1 billion. About 15% of these people caught crossing the border have children who are U.S. citizens. A lot of them are not bad people or criminals, they're just trying to find a better life in the U.S. and be with their children. Ultimately, they end up in these privately owned prisons where they receive horrible treatment while waiting to be deported. Uprisings like the one at Ritmo seem to be all too common at these private for-profit prisons, and something needs to be done. All of the inmates at Ritmo were eventually transferred, and Ritmo was shut down. However, many of these private for-profit prisons still exist and are operating today.